Let me ask you something. Who are you when the decision is hard or the pressure is real and no one's watching? Not who you want to be and not who you are on a good day. Who you actually are when it counts. You see, most leaders have never had to answer that. And that gap between who you think you are and who you actually show up as is costing you more than you realise. Most founders and MDs build their identity around outcomes. I'm a good leader because the business is growing. I'm decisive because we hit target last quarter. I'm resilient because I got through that tough year. And here's the danger. When you build your sense of self on outcomes, your identity becomes fragile because outcomes change, markets shift, teams fail, targets get missed. And the moment results dip, so does your belief in yourself. I see this constantly. Leaders who were sharp, clear, confident, suddenly second guessing every decision. Not because they've gotten worse at their job, but because their identity was tied to a number on a spreadsheet and that number moved. This is an identity problem and it's more common than anyone talks about. Every leader I've ever worked with has had a moment where their identity is cracked, where the vision of themselves they'd believed in stopped feeling true. It's usually a specific event. It could be a failed hire that cost the business, a board conversation that went badly, a decision that in hindsight was wrong and they know it, a period where they felt like they were performing the role rather than inhabiting it. And in that moment, the question is never about the event, it's about what you do with the crack. You see, some leaders paper over it. They double down on performance, project more confidence externally, because internally things feel shaky. And for a while it works until the next crack, which is usually bigger. Other leaders use it. They get curious. They ask, what does this moment tell me about how I actually function under pressure? What's the thing I've been avoiding knowing about myself? That second response is harder in the short term. It requires a very specific kind of courage. Not the courage to face external threats, but the courage to face yourself honestly. And the leaders who have that courage, who can look at themselves clearly without ego or defensiveness, they are almost always the most effective leaders I encounter because they know themselves, and knowing yourself is the beginning of leading others well. Now, let me be direct about something. Self-belief is not confidence. Confidence is situational. Confidence rises and falls based on what's in front of you. You feel confident in your area of expertise, less so when you're out of your depth. Self-belief is different. Self-belief is the quiet conviction that you're capable of figuring it out, even when you don't yet know how. It's not, I know I'll get this right. It's, I know I'm the kind of person who works through hard things. Now that's fundamentally different place to operate from. I've worked with leaders who've lost companies, been made redundant, had their strategy publicly fail, and they're still standing, still leading, still clear, because their identity wasn't destroyed when the outcome was. And I've worked with high performers who crumble the moment things get uncertain. Not because they lack skill, but because their sense of self was already borrowed from the external validation, from the results, from what other people thought of them. When that validation disappears, even temporarily, they don't know who they are anymore. That's a fragile version of leadership, and it's far more prevalent at a senior level than anyone admits. So if you shouldn't build your identity on outcomes, what should you build it on? 3 things. And I want you to think about whether you actually have all 3. First, your values under pressure. Not your stated values, not the ones on the wall, your actual values. The ones that show up when you're tired, when you're under the wire, when the easier path is clearly the wrong one. Do you know what you'll protect even when it costs you? Because that's identity. That's who you actually are. Second, your decision-making character. You see, every leader has a pattern when things get hard. Some delay, some perform confidence they don't feel. Some make unilateral calls to avoid the discomfort of involving others. Some deflect, push a decision down or up. Do you know your pattern? Because if you don't fully know yourself as a leader. And if you don't know yourself, you can't self-correct when it matters most. And thirdly, your relationship with uncertainty. Leaders who have the most stable identity are often the ones who've made peace with not knowing. They don't need certainty to act. They don't need all the information to commit. They trust themselves to navigate whatever comes next. Not because they're reckless, but because they've done it before and they know what they're made of. These three things, values under pressure, decision-making character, and your relationship with uncertainty, that's the foundation. That's where durable self-belief comes from. So practically, what do you actually do with this? Three things. And I want to be honest, none of them are quick. First, stop outsourcing your identity to results. Start noticing when your mood, your confidence, your sense of self-worth is tied to a metric, be that revenue, headcount, someone else's opinion of you. That's not identity, that's dependency. Identity is what remains when the metric isn't there. Secondly, develop your decision-making autobiography. Look back at the last 12 months of significant decisions, and I don't mean to judge them, to understand them. What were the conditions when you were at your sharpest? What slowed you down? What patterns do you see? Because your past decisions are the clearest evidence of who you actually are under pressure, not who you intend to be. Thirdly, put yourself in situations where you can't rely on your expertise. You see, most senior leaders avoid this because they've worked hard to become the expert in the room. But genuine self-belief, the durable kind, is built in situations where your knowledge doesn't save you, where you have to rely on your judgment, your values, your character, not your CV. That's where you find out who you actually are. And that's where you build your belief in yourself. That doesn't crumble the moment the results change. The leader you think you are and the leader you actually are, those two things should be the same person. But for most people at a senior level, there's a gap. And that gap is where self-doubt lives, where second guessing happens, where good decisions get delayed or avoided. Closing that gap isn't a mindset exercise. It's not a motivational poster. It's a serious, deliberate work on understanding yourself, how you decide what you project, what you're actually like when the pressure is real. If you're a founder, an MD, or a senior leader who felt that gap, who's had moments where the version of yourself you were projecting didn't match who you felt inside, this channel is built for you. Subscribe, because this is the work that actually changes how you lead. If you want to go deeper on this work, and if you're ready to close that gap properly, I run a coaching program called The Empowered Entrepreneur. It's built for founders and senior leaders who want to lead with more clarity, more conviction, and less noise in their head. There's a link in the description. Book a call and let's find out where you actually are. See you on the next video.